by two. Brother, Victor.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
What do you want to do?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I will be joined by Julian Darius. I will be handing over to he and I in a moment or two. But I want to let you know, this is it. We have reached the end of our journey. Everything that was Red Dwarf, we have discussed, right back to the 1988 Series 1, right now to 2020, and talking about The Promised Land. We will now get on to how we feel about this, but more than that, we're also going to be listing out each of our favourite episodes from each of the series, why we loved them, and let's see what you think. So, I'm now going to hand over to myself and Julian, and hopefully you enjoy the show.
That's,
I think I'd agree with that. But luckily, 12 wasn't the last thing to be produced. It wasn't the last series. We got very recently, in fact, April this year, we got The Promised Land, a feature-length episode aired on. Well, it was in one big go. It's interesting. However, weirdly, it's presented on the UK TV app as 2 episodes, which is bizarre. But
weird.
Yeah, which is odd. And the story very much is following a distress call. The Red Dwarf crew come across 3 cat clerics, and the rest of the cat species then come in hot pursuit. These 3 cat clerics see Lister as Cloister, and so worship him. And whilst being pursued, they have to deal with this idea of Lister's godhood, how the cat people have evolved, and a whole bunch of other stuff, resulting in an interesting finish. But The Promised Land, 90 minutes, a 90-minute episode. What were your thoughts?
I like this a lot. I don't know that it's great, but I think that of these sort of like longer episodes, to me this is 3 episodes, and I took notes of sort of like when the breaks came in, that would be like, okay, that's the end of a half-hour episode. So I think it's strong. I love that it goes back to the first episode and actually introduces these cat people. They're sort of feral cats. They're very Klingons. But I do love that they're doing that. I think that it's fun watching them worship Lister and Lister having to struggle with that. And I think that more than that, it's amazing to me that it hangs together as a complete story in a way that the other multi-part episodes really don't. Obviously the prime example is Back to Earth, which I think we agree that it starts strong and then just kind of like deteriorates, kind of goes off the rails. You wind up in this Blade Runner pastiche. This is not where you started. Back in the Red, which is the start of 8 as they're back on the populated Red Dwarf, I like that a whole lot. But that also kind of like starts sliding into other areas, and it's like, oh, it's all in their minds, it's they're all captured and it's illusion. It's great fun, don't get me wrong. I think it's really good. I probably like it more overall than The Promised Land, but I think The Promised Land hangs together as a narrative better. Even the sort of defeating the cats with a laser pointer at the end, That's there in the very first one, right? That's there at the very beginning. I don't love it, but it's set up, right? It's set up properly. And part of my problems with these other longer ones have been that they're not set up properly.
Yeah, I think the way these were filmed may have something to do with it. And I think also because this was sort of a bit of a big deal, it feels like they've given it more time. So they've sort of gone back and they've checked it and they've edited it and done things with it. Because I think you're right. I think this has a level of consistency that's been missed. Was definitely missing from 12, but has also missed from multi-part episodes they've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed this. I have to admit, I think it's got some real ambition. It's got some really good set pieces. I think the humor's good. I think some of the acting, some of the acting is really good, and some of the concepts are good. And that's not to say it's all good. I think there's some stuff that you sort of mentioned, the laser pointer thing. I know it's set up. I really hate it.
Yeah, yeah.
I hate it. I hate it when it's used at the start. I hate it when it's used at the end. I hate the cat flap door.
Yeah.
That bothers me. It's just nitpicky stuff. But overall, I mean, there's things in this that these cats, they've evolved from. I'm trying to explain it. They've evolved from a cat, which is fine. I get all that. But then, like, there's moments. It's sort of like they're played for humor. But like the idea of when you get the ruler cat, which turns out to be our cat's brother, which I think is quite an interesting sort of concept.
Mm-hmm.
Rodon, I think it's called. When they find him and he's in his bed, just knocking things on the floor, because that's what cats do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's great. I don't pick fleas off other people because that's what chimps do.
Right. Yeah.
And so I get it as a joke, but I'm still sort of like, it still feels like that cheap humor. I mean, but there's other stuff though that I really like. I actually kind of like the sort of like the soppy three clerics. I find them quite endearing, and this need to believe in Cloister and this other stuff. Like, I think is really strong, and I think it does work as an overall episode. Again though, it does come down to a fast-paced resolution of, we've got to get round to the finish. Let's have someone come up with a solution, which I find a little irritating. But other than that, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, there's a lot that... well, I mean, on the list of things I don't like, I'm not in love with Rimmer as a superhero. Rimmer gets this upgrade, and that's kind of the Deus Ex Machina, at the end. I'm not in love with that. What do you think about Holly sort of basically Holly's restored, which is, again, I loved in Skipper, right? So, I mean, there's this part of me that just goes, Holly, every time he comes back. But what do you make of him sort of being, a lot like Queeg and sort of being the villain there for the first third?
I like, there are certain moments, like the jokes, like I really enjoy the fact that, because obviously this was started in the 80s, the idea of the massive floppy disk,
Yes,
that then got sort of like Holly backup written on the back of it in marker pen, stuff like that. Like that to me is all good stuff. I find that's really funny. It's silly, and I know that some of this sort of silly stuff irritates me, but I kind of like that. But yeah, the fact that like a factory setting Holly is going to be that sort of callous, almost to sort of like Queeg, or when they had the sort of like preemptive one in Entangled. It just feels out of character, because Holly would never sort of go, there's clearly sort of like 4 sentient beings on this ship. But none of you appear to be JMC staff anymore, so I'm going to plow this into a sun. I mean,
Yeah.
again, like even in like not to go full sci-fi, but the basic laws of robotics sort of clearly would say, uh, oh, okay, well, surely then my function now, instead of it being just for JMC thing, is going to be to just try and maintain life on ship. I don't know. It feels silly,
Yeah,
but
I agree.
um,
It's cool that Crichton looks dirty, right? And that's kind of
yes,
Crichton dies at the end and he's resurrected, which I think is kind of a play on, Spock in Star Trek 2 and Data in Next Gen. Um,
mm,
it's nice. I mean, Cat gets that moment of kind of like, I'll stay. I belong with these people. Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that like, Crichton, there's this sort of like in the beginning, there's this discussion of Lister as the last human yet again, right?
mm.
And Crichton proposes turning Cat into a woman to solve this, which is funny. But again, I think like really, you have no cloning technology, right?
Yeah,
Clearly, you have if you have scans of their brains, as we've just established in the previous season, and as to create Rimmer as a hologram, you clearly, come on, you can clone somebody. But
yeah.
it's, I love Rimmer sort of telling Crichton to erase his memory, then asking if he's erased his memory and, having to erase the memory of that. And then, Crichton going to the screen and saying, my God, there's a distress call here. That's a very good bit.
I'll admit, like the first 10 minutes of this, I was so into it because of that. I mean, I know, like you say, the cloning technology. We've seen that cloning technology exists in Rimmerworld. Like we know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that like it's the character moments. I like the way Robert Llewellyn plays Crichton when he's come up with this idea and he's sort of like, and hear me out. Because he knows exactly what I'm going to say. He's like, I could turn you into woman. Now hear me out. And he's sort of constantly sort of like trying to jump them and stop them from sort of stopping him. And then when he finally comes to the end of his idea, this idea of like turning the cat into a woman for them to then procreate and create a child, just how pleased and happy he is with the idea of not just them with his idea, but this idea of a child, like it's clearly that's what he wants, and it's just this sort of like almost like serene, and so that whole bit is it's and it boils down to this idea, this argument then, which I think it would do, of like actually between the cat and Lister, who would make the better woman?
Yeah, right.
Because that's incredibly blokey of like, oh, we're going to boil it down to a competition.
Yes.
And I do like all that because again, there's this whole running joke of Crichton needs a service because Rimmer says follow me, so he tries to follow him like incognito.
Yeah,
and bits like that, like they're relatively silly, but because they're not like you're saying, with 12, it was I think I'm not saying agenda driven, but idea driven. But these are sort of like seem like silly, funny character moments. I'm quite enjoying, and it's like I said, the whole interaction of like. Delete that memory. Did you delete? Did you delete that memory? What memory, sir? The memory of the SOS. Well, there's an SOS.
Yeah,
that whole section is brilliant. I really enjoy that.
I agree.
Even Rimmer's response to it when they find out there's an SOS, he's like, "What should we tell you?" That he's like, "Sod them, Crichton. We're too old to be jaunting around space saving people now." And we're too old to be running around spaceships being chased by a genetic cheese. It's like. All this stuff I'm loving. Like the opening of this episode is really good.
Oh, I agree, and I do like. Again, I said like I love any acknowledgement that they're aging. So I do love that line from Rimmer. As they're fighting against Holly, there's this. I don't think this really works. Where they're covering their mouths like in 2001, and they're planning the EMP. What I do think, I mean, it's mildly clever, but, you see it coming a mile away. It's been done elsewhere. What I do think works is after they're bragging about how, it's too late to stop him. Crichton's about to do it. Crichton shows up and It's clearly they've got the time wrong. But, Crichton shows up sort of whistling and says, like, that thing you told me is going to, he's in real trouble in 12 hours,
Yeah. And the argument over what's PM and AM.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. It's really, I think some of this stuff's really good. It is playing on, it is Queeg-esque.
Yeah.
But I do like it. I do quite enjoy this whole bit, and it feeds us into the excuse for them to have to leave the ship.
Right.
And I like the fact that again they sort of, it harkens back to a sort of a comment that I think comes back from things in the past. Is they go, we just missed that SOS a couple of days ago. It only take us a day or two to catch up with them, and it's like 3 months later. But it's Holly who said it previously. But there's sort of like the thing about space. Space is big.
It's really big, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, like I say, I'm let's say 20 minutes, 25 minutes into this, and I'm feeling that this is them back on board of sort of like, would I say 11 level good? Yeah, probably. There's moments in this that I'm genuinely laughing at. I think the chemistry is really good. They all feel like they're really enjoying doing it. So, it's firing on pretty much all cylinders, I think, to begin with.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot tighter in the editing and in the scripting. But there's also a lot of just like little loving details thrown in. I love the not alert sign in Starbug. When they're not on red alert, or there's just not alert. Rimmer writing Crichton up for listening to me. I can't think of anything to charge him with. I do think it takes it's like the end of the first of the 3 episodes that the cats show up. It takes a little long to get there for me, but I mean that makes sense. I do love these cats. I love seeing them. I love following up on it. I love how they eat in 3 vindaloos a day, and the Anubis stone that they prize is initially thought to be polished dong. I like their sort of, I kept thinking that song that they do, like Cloister, Cloisty.
Yeah.
It's very much it's like the Ewok song from the end of Jedi, right?
Was it the Jub Jub song? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think these 3 guys are very good. I like this sort of, again, they start to, this is where it works, where they start to broach ideas, but they seem to do it in a character way, because the fact of the matter is, like, Lister's always been uncomfortable with this idea. He thought he'd passed it, he thought he's addressed it with the cat, decades before. And now he's got to sort of cover this whole thing again of like, look, I'm not your god. Like, think for yourself. That's his whole sort of point. And again, like, I really like these moments where, he's like, look, I can't tell them. And they're saying to him, like, look, you can't tell them. It'll break their heart or whatever. Like, and he ends up sending the others in to do it. And so you get this round of people so Crichton goes in first, and then sort of like I know how you feel about Mr. Lister, and sort of I just have to say sort of like, well, he's a wonderful person. Sort of like, he can't tell them because it means sort of denouncing sort of Lister. Then they convert the cat, which is brilliant,
wonderful.
And then obviously Rimmer goes in just as Rimmer's about to sort of do it, he gets interrupted. But again, I love that when he gives his excuses of sort of like, he went on a course for delivering bad news and he was the best in the class.
Yeah.
And his thing is sort of like, what was it? Unfortunately, we got some good news and some bad news. We found your penis. Unfortunately, it was your dog that found it first.
Yes.
And things like that. So again, like, yeah, it's working for me. This is.
But you isolated a great portion. And I think that that whole sort of who's going to tell them bit. is really wonderful. But it's also wonderful because you were talking about character, and it manages to be funny, but it gets at those characters, and it helps me to see them in new ways. I love that there's this kind of like central dynamic at first with Crichton of like Lister has transformed Crichton, taught him to think for himself, which is so fascinating because these cats worship him, and he does have a religious message. I mean, he has been a messiah to Crichton. He has changed Crichton's life. But his message is think for yourself, defy authority, right? So I find that, it also kind of comes back to, when Kachansky came on board and Crichton, clearly was just in love with Dave. That, and like you said, earlier in part one, that Crichton is, just like the very motherly face that he has at the prospect of, Lister having kids. So that relationship is I think beautiful and sort of thrown into relief by these cats who worship him, and you see, Crichton worships him too, but he is a kind of like religious leader to Crichton. And I think, just for me, when Barry steps up and just like, who's going to criticize Lister? And it's like, you just see that look on Rimmer's face where it's like, I've been waiting my whole life for this job. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's this is the thing. It's just sort of like, they're all. Like I say, I think the fact of the matter is, because this was such a big deal for the channel, they've given this some real attention. Like, they've clearly rehearsed this. They've clearly gone in and edited it and scripted it as tightly as possible. And it feels like that. This is a polished piece of entertainment, where they've gone in and gone, that joke works, that one doesn't. This, and they've really sort of like honed in on specific things. And because of that, like, I just find that it's working so well. And the fact that, like you say, not only is it sort of character driven, because it then shifts gear, and that's why I think this is so good for me. It's like, because like you say, it does come in sort of three parts, doesn't it? But it sort of shifts gear because it then goes from you've had the comedy points, you've had all the sort of the character interactions, to literally becoming a chase movie. And the action is so well balanced with the comedy. I mean, it's external action. You've got the sort of like Starbug doing bits and pieces and all this other stuff, and then the hit and all that. But it's so well balanced with the comedy that I'm sort of getting flashes of some of the best stuff from sort of like 4 and 5 and those sort of times. It's the joke that sort of we'll get onto when Holly comes back later, but there's a moment where they hit and they've jettisoned. Lister's first thought is to jettison the engines,
the rear part that's been hit, right? Star Trek style,
Yeah. And he obviously gets ripped for it, but then it's obviously it's driving Starbug to crash. And I think it's Rimmer or Lister sort of asks Crichton for their trajectory. He's like, straight down, sir.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's part of a bigger part that I thought was more amusing, where, they asked Dave to explain what he was thinking, and he says, we're about to blow up. I know we don't have engines, but we're alive today. We've got to focus on today. And to be alive tomorrow. And I think it's Crichton who says, it's the day part of your plan that's the problem. And then they say, "You're what's the flight trajectory? Down, sir." And he says, "Can you be more specific?" Straight down. It's just a wonderful. And then there's this whole bit with the Starbug owner's manual that like you find out it's got all these features that they didn't know about, and it has a parachute that Cat's stolen, which doesn't matter because it's got a backup parachute. But the owner's manual is a clever bit.
Well, this is where Crichton, we've had sort of Crichton in many ways, but we've had Crichton become snarky with people a little bit more so in the last couple of series, and I like that he does that because he calls the cat out because he's reading through the manual and he sort of says, we've got a parachute, and he's sort of like, is it the sort of the silky shiny thing that comes with it? He's like, yes, and he happens to be wearing the gilet that he's turned it into. And he says, well, luckily it comes with the second one. And then Crichton leans in on Cat and is like, do we have a second one? Or is it hanging up in one of your wardrobes somewhere? And he proper calls him out on it. And I was a bit like, wow, yeah, you go, Crichton. And so, yeah, there's some great moments. But like you say, the moment with the manual is fantastic because they find out the entertainment system's got a pinch and zoom effect. But then there's also something about the seats. He says, "Oh, don't tell me they've got a seat." He says, you've read it too. So yeah, that whole bit is again like it's one of those things you sort of think, yeah, why have they not? What? Well, two things. Firstly, like, why have they never hit on that before? Because that's a really good sort of set of jokes. You think would be quite an easy, that's something that really I'd have thought would have come up earlier.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years before, but I also why I don't think there is one, but why isn't there like a Haynes manual for Starbug? Because that would be really cool.
Yeah, and I thought there have been several times where Starbug gets upgraded for the purposes of plot, right?
Mm.
And you and I have both sort of said, okay, well, we see what you're doing here. You want Starbug to be able to do X, Y, and Z, so that's what this is accomplishing. And it feels, shoehorned in and not natural. Here, you get the same effect, but it's just them finding the owner's manual, which I think is just such a wonderful alternative to aliens upgraded us, right?
Yeah, I think it is. It works so well because you also find out that it's got it can convert to electric and it does this other stuff and. It is just for the plot, but it does. It just works better.
Yes.
And like I say, so seamlessly, and they're all sort of doing so well. But it looks good as well.
Oh yeah.
Like this is what I would say. The special effects, the CG on this, and the computer effects they've got, because that moment of Starbug sort of like dashing around on the desert planet and stuff being shot at, it looks good. Like this
absolutely.
It's not like, this isn't sort of Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars level good, but it looks good.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm taken in by it. And it's if it looked cheap and naff, I think, you'd probably lose some of that effect. But again, this is why it works better, because I think because it looks so good. And I'm into that. At one point they've got, because a space station has been destroyed, the cat people or the cat army have destroyed the space station, and they've got like debris falling and it's climbing towards them. Like, it looks, because this looks so good, the peril and the stakes feel better. But it also, one of the things we haven't actually touched on, because we sort of jumped ahead because it's a good bit, is actually a Rimmer piece. You sort of mentioned Rimmer about Rimmer being a superhero.
Yes.
They do go to a space station, which is where they first meet the cat clerics, and they find that there's this thing's obviously massively advanced from them, and in advance of hard light is diamond light, and that Rimmer can be upgraded to this diamond light, which is sort of like his superhero persona. What does he call himself? Glitter guy, or
the mighty light.
The mighty light. And it's a great, again though, the costume's a bit cheesy and it's all a bit silly. It's it's obviously supposed to be a bit of a riff on that superhero look, but it's a good concept. I kind of like the concept. This idea that you can transfer other things into light. I mean, it's very sci-fi, but something I like this idea that he can turn into a little light bee and zip around the ship.
I do like that.
That's really cool.
Well, and it makes sense. I mean, and we have seen him on occasion phase through walls, where he turns off the hard light. And so it's like, okay, that's cool. They should have done more of that. What I like with Rimmer more than that is, essentially, that he even has a spit curl like Superman in his superhero mode. But his battery burns out because of course he insisted they not test it before they used it on him because he was so hungry for power. And then he has to go around the ship with extension cords, kind of, plugging his life. And that's a good joke. And, that is a joke you think, it's astounding to me that it took 70 some episodes to get to that joke because it's just a solid joke. And then, because we're sort of like, talking about the sort of second part, which ends with them flying into the sandstorm as the feral cats are attacking to them. Just before that, Rimmer enters low power mode, and he's finally gray. And they've done it, and it looks good. And it's, Rimmer as in live action as he was originally envisioned. And knowing that, I mean, it's just so cool to see this actually happen. And it looks good.
Yeah, because this is obviously this is how he is described in the novel. This is how he is drawn in the comics when they first did. Did the comics for the Smegazine back in the early 90s. So yeah, they've finally done it. He's he has that mono voice, and he's black and white. He's grey tone, and it looks really good.
Absolutely.
I've always, it's one of those things that you think, well, you probably wouldn't have been able to have the evolution of the character they had if he had done this, because obviously, colours sort of become part of who he is over time. But but I also like the dynamic that it's the cat that does it to him, which is really interesting. That he points it out. Is it? I can't remember if it's the cat or Lister, but this notion that he's sort of like, he's I almost died sort of thing. Is like, well, you're already dead.
Yeah, it is the cat. Yeah, the cat.
Yeah,
this is kind of fascinating.
Because then he says, "Well, I'm dead, but I'm still me." He says, "Well, no, you're a computer version of you. Like everything that you're doing is just computer generated." And it really throws him into this sort of existential crisis of whether or not he's actually a sentient being. Is he just a computer sort of simulation, or is he alive? He sends him into a bit of a depression. But it's it's fuzzy. It's interesting that it's the cat that brings it up. But more so, it's just an interesting concept for Lister, for Rimmer to have to deal with. I especially
agree.
Entering this grey tone.
I agree, and I think that I love the gray tone. And as far as this existential crisis, right? I mean, we've seen Cat do this before, where usually with Lister, where he'll talk to Lister and he'll say, don't think about how desperate you are, like don't think about how terrible life is. Boy, if I were you, I'd kill myself. Good luck, buddy. So he's sort of playing that here with Rimmer. But I love this implication because, of course, it's correct, right? I mean, and they don't really address it on the series enough, that Rimmer isn't Rimmer. I mean, Rimmer's dead. He's a computer simulation of Rimmer. That's been clear from the first episode. But usually, you just elide the difference. And then you're like, well, I died. Well, yeah, actually, you didn't die,
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, it gives this episode this movie a bit of poignancy as Rimmer debates and does, for a time being, literally pull his own plug. It's a little dark.
Yeah, it is. And this is again where, we've seen this in the past, that when Red Dwarf goes to these places, and it has done, it's really good. This again, like it'll play it for laughs, and it also eventually taps into the relationship between Lister and Rimmer, because it's Lister that sort of steps forward and brings him back a bit, makes him plug himself back in. But this thing, like they've done it in the past, where they've addressed this idea of, everyone else is dead. In the early episodes, there were notions of sort of for Lister to be dealing with these things and to confront them, and then Rimmer's done it as well, to confront the notion of his dad dying, or other bits and pieces. So that when it goes to these places, it's I really like it because I think it's challenging the characters in a way that a sitcom sometimes doesn't as much as it should do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things about about this though is one of the things I keep coming back to as well is of course is this isn't the original Rimmer,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Well,
because
it's not the original reconstruction of Rimmer either, right? Is your point?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's the point. It's not the original hologram of Rimmer. So that original Rimmer, if he's whether he's a simulation or whatever, had sort of come to terms with that in many respects to become Ace Rimmer. So this is a different journey, and this is almost that Ace Rimmer. Being able to become the Mighty Light and eventually having to sacrifice it is almost that same. It's a similar Ace Rimmer journey, and again I find it interesting that he has to. They always seem to put Rimmer up against these notions.
Yeah, I thought about that too. That it's kind of like this Rimmer's version of Ace Rimmer. I wonder what you thought about that. I don't love the conversation between Lister and Rimmer, where Lister's trying to prep him up, mostly because I don't like the sort of like moonlight analogy that he makes, right? That the moon doesn't make light, and it needs the sun, yet there's moonlight, and obviously it's like their relationship, right? That they're better together is, I think, the best thing you could say about that. But it also is like, oh yeah, you're just the moon here. You were just made to keep me sane. And but what I do like about it, I mean, first of all, there's the humor of Crichton coming in and his face when Rimmer asks, "Do you like me?" But it's wonderful. And then you clearly see that Dave is trying not to say "I like you." And it's clear that, I mean, we've had lots of iterations of these characters that are basically inconsistent with others, but where they learn something and they've forgotten it by next episode. But it is really clear that Dave does like him. And there is it in this episode where they say Kat says like I like not liking you. Yeah, he's later on Kat says
Actually,
I didn't like him, but I like not liking him.
Yeah, who am I going to not like now? Yeah, and that's it. The thing is, he serves a purpose. I agree with you about the conversation. I think it's not as good. And again, I think it's better played out in Stoke Me a Clipper. Because it's actions there that show that relationship rather than than just saying it. Because in that one sort of like List is obviously on board with Rimmer becoming Ace Rimmer, and he steps in as the knight to sort of like to put him under threat so he can sort of do something brave, and then he's the one that covers for him and all this other stuff. So it's actions showing that. So I get the point and I relate it back to Stoke Me a Clipper, which is good, but it doesn't work quite as well. But I still feel it. I still feel like they've definitely got sort of like a kinship and a brothership between them, which is really quite sweet actually and quite touching. Despite the fact that they're willing to sort of like nag at each other pretty much constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then keeping on those character points, there's that whole sort of thing as like, is Lister a good person, right? Which the cats worshiping him kind of again throws into relief. And then there's this discussion of, Lister says, well, anyone would have protected Frankenstein, the cat that he saved and went into stasis. and one by one, they all say, "No, I would not have done that."
Yeah.
And Lister, who again, it kind of gets back to a point that is made in Back to Earth and then not followed up on, where Lister's like, I am a lazy sod, but I'm a good guy, and I deserve Kachansky, or at least a shot at her. I'm not just scum. There is this kind of like nice moment here that's done in, I think a way I prefer, in which, it's underlined for you that, Lister is Lister. I mean, he's a slob, but he is a good guy, and he is, different from these others.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that this feature length episode does, and is given the room to do, is it does give each of the characters, these moments, throughout it to sort of shine and to show something more about them. In particular, obviously, Lister and Rimmer, but yeah, throughout this episode, all the main four are given some absolutely excellent moments that sort of like is focusing on, like you said, the essence of that character, and giving them that sort of that moment of going, that's what Crichton is, that's what the cat is, that's what Lister is, that's what, and it really works for me in this, because I think they care. If this was the last thing they did for Red Dwarf, and you never know, it might well be. There are moments in this I'm thinking, I'm glad you got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's important.
Well, and you said, of those four, but it's also true for Holly. That they contact Holly and say that basically they're trying to con the evil original Holly to replace his personality with the records of the one who they know. And they, say, well, he's going to have the wisdom of 3 million years. And of course, we know, no, it's the insanity of being alone for 3 million years. And I'm not in love with how Holly blows up the moon, and Red Dwarf is thrown free. But I do love the exchanges with Holly. As Holly says, they say, "Oh, this sounds really dangerous," and he says, "Oh, well, I've already fired the missile," which is insane. And then it says, "Oh, I missed the moon." And like, how completely gonzo. And then he fires and it works. And they, there's this wonderful bit as Holly asks if anyone survived, and they say, "Oh, we all did," and Holly says, "Oh, wow."
His reaction, Norman Lovett's reaction to that, he's like, "All of you, really?" Wow. I never would have guessed. That's a miracle. But he has another one. One of the moments where he sort of, again, because his timing, it's the editing, but the timing on this is so perfect. Is when I think one of them says sort of like, right, is this gonna be all right? And Holly's response is, "Well, I'm fine. I'm miles away."
yeah.
And so, that whole segment is spot on, and it's so well timed. The comedy is fantastic, but Norman Lovett's great. Yeah, but at the moment when his reaction when you survived, wow, yeah, couldn't have predicted that. All of you, really, wow, yeah.
Well, and he says, the second shot he assures them, "I'll do better next time." And they say, "Oh, so you've got it all calculated." He's like, "Well, no, I'm pretty sure it's going to hit the moon." The standards are so low.
Yeah. I mean, that feels to me, that we've talked about before, but this is where it sort of veers into that sort of like Douglas Adams sort of like, almost sort of farcical ridiculousness, which is great. And it does it so well. I mean, but this is where we lead up to that finish. This whole sort of like middle act has been the chase and the resolution of this thing. But even I was talking about Holly. Even some of his reactions when he's sort of like, he tells him about just to open the door on the ship. He's like, "We don't know where we are." He's like, "We'll just open the door and have a look outside." we're buried under sort of 10 100 tons of sand. He's like, oh yeah, that's a pickle. That is. But yeah, they go back to Red Dwarf and they find, and again, the sort of the cats are there. He's like, Holly, why didn't you tell us? He's like, yeah, I can't lie, I forgot.
Yeah.
But you're leading into this sort of confrontation, this sort of final confrontation, and you learn something about the cat eventually, that he wasn't always cool.
Oh yeah,
in fact, he was left. And in fact, he was left behind because he wasn't cool, which is interesting.
Yeah, and kind of like Rimmer, like Cat has overcompensated too for this essential. Like all the characters loathe themselves, right? I mean, it's crystal clear. Lister maybe less, but Rimmer clearly hates himself. Crichton worships humans, and isn't crazy about things he's designed to serve, and I guess he is. But we find out, Cat has always been much more monodimensional, in love with himself, doesn't need to be more than that. And yeah, I thought this was fascinating, and it does also help understand that first episode, that that at least there's some reason why he was the only one left behind, as everybody went off into space.
Well, the other thing it does for me is to know that he once wasn't cool and all this other stuff. It sort of puts into focus why he hates Dwayne Dibley so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that it's the antithesis of cool or whatever. It's like no, that's who he was. That's why in Better Than Life, Back to Reality.
Mm-hmm.
If you knowing that. Knowing this moment now that he was left behind because he was uncool and this other stuff, watching Back to Reality and his desire to kill himself, it now makes a lot more sense. From an emotional impact, it's like this is the reason I was left behind. And maybe it's obviously this is me retrospective. This is me retconning that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And giving some cats some more depth. But to me, I'm like, okay, that now makes more sense as to why becoming the Duke of Dork, Dwayne Dibley, is so poisonous to him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. And, we've seen so many kind of, retcons and, stuff that doesn't stick, episodes that are, in one way or another incongruous with the whole. This feels like something different. I mean, this feels like, I think you're pointing out how this enhances those past episodes, whether it's the first episode or Back to Earth. And Dwayne Dibley, has come back, What is it? Where did he come back?
In Polymorph 2, he comes back,
right.
Series 6. So yeah, back to 5 and 6 is really where they tap into that. But it means something. I feel that it means something. But I also like the fact that when you look at the the design of the costumes and stuff, the cat species that jettisoned off into space have sort of become that they have a very specific design. They've don't want to say barbarian, but they're very closer to that sort of medieval kind of look, aren't they? Whilst Cat has clearly sort of based himself on earth-based clothing, the suits and the all that kind of stuff. So he didn't want to go. It adds a dimension to me. I'm like, okay, so some of that may have actually been a choice to reject, some of that cat culture.
Right. Yeah. And well, it's interesting because then that means that he's made himself cool in his own way, right? He's not, there's a lot of, earlier we were talking about the sort of theme of Lister as a kind of, messiah who has brought Crichton to think for himself, right? Well, Cat has become cool for himself. He's not following the trend. He's not following what the other cats think are cool. has learned. I mean, the other thing is he's learned to love himself. Not just be his own person, but he seems to really love himself. He loves who he's become.
Yeah.
Which, what a great lesson. I mean, I wish the all of us, but the rest of the characters could progress in that direction, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that there's just this one-off, because just this, it almost feels like it's a throwaway line that in this sort of the purpose of the TV episode is that it's the line is there for Cat to retort that he is home.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that thing of like, well, we left you behind because you weren't cool. You appear to be cool now, so you can come with us. That's what it's there for in this instant. And then for Cat to say, like, no, Red Dwarf is now my home, and that is enough in itself. That's quite a cool thing. But maybe they intended it this way. I don't know, and I think maybe I'm just giving it my own headcanon. But like you say, in doing that, you can see there's so much more to the Cat, and you go, okay, that's where you can sort of backtrack all this stuff, and it becomes really meaningful. And another thing where this episode really brings people's arcs to a close. You get this acknowledgement of things like the Cat is, like you say, he's completely comfortable in himself, and neglecting the fact that he's obviously been classed as a psychopath. He is comfortable with the rest of the crew. Like, he is, like you say, he's comfortable with himself. He's comfortable with all this other stuff and who he is. It almost sort of, he hasn't got a great arc, but it's a positive one. And the same for Crichton in this sort of thing of, that's what you said about sort of like his relationship with Lister, but also, and Rimmer gets his. He gets the sacrifice. It's his Ace Rimmer moment.
Right.
And Lister gets to have his Messiah, not a Messiah moment by sort of giving that teaching of like, be yourself. Like, you don't need to follow a leader, or you don't need to follow a Messiah. This works as a sort of a tying up of loose ends, and to many ways of sort of like bringing those characters to an arc close. I don't know if that's what don't you think about that?
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, because I want more Red Dwarf. But I think that's a very well made argument, and I mean, the fact that I think first of all it connects with the sort of revelation at the end that which is actually a legit point in theology, that the promised land is within. Right, which is a little convenient, and then the cats kind of you start worshiping Rimmer, which is a joke and it's funny, but the idea that the promised land is within and all those characters have some sort of arc, but I also think that it gets back to what you were saying about how this is more polished and more refined, that it's one of the, classic things of sort of asking, well, what is each character's arc, right? Where do they start? Where do they end up? And here, even Cat has an arc, yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think, I watched this independently, really, sort of when it came out, but going back and watching it again, and especially sort of following series 12, this is given so much more love and attention, and works all the better for it. And I honestly think that is this the best of Red? Not in the best thing of Red Dwarf, but does this present the best of Red Dwarf? In many cases, it does. Does it always work? No. There are moments, as I've said before, that don't. I think the way they beat the Cat people is crap. I think that the sort of the quick conclusion that Lister makes, like, this is someone who hasn't, but I'll say this, someone they've made a point repeatedly that he's never read a bloody book, yet for some reason he knows about Egyptian mythology, the Anubis stone, and it's sort of like, oh yeah, but what would you do, if you mummify things to jump to, so it could be covering something else. I'm like, what? How have you come to that conclusion? Like, that makes no sense.
I had a different objection to that, which is how have all these scanners not figured out there's something inside dung? Dung does not have like anti-radi like lead-like properties, you know.
Especially an energy source. This thing's supposed to be an energy source. So yeah, that again, it comes back to that sort of like quick resolution that bothers me in series 12, and that sort of thing of like, oh, got to get to the end. That annoyed me. But other than that, like, you know, I think there's some really, really good stuff in this for the sort of like the cat people, for the, you know, for the bits, but also just for the crew. I just really enjoyed, and some of the comedy in it is so solid.
Well, I mean, the couple things, you know, we haven't mentioned. I mean, as far as that goes, there's a lot of great little touches. It's not great, but they're the ideas that these were vegans on the Iron Star, and so they have these forks that, you know, only work on vegan food. So yeah, that there's this wonderful bit. Well, Lister's tossing the fork as he's about to fight this cat with the cats have like Wolverine claws, right? Which is, you know, a little silly, but you know, he's tossing the fork side to side, ready to, you know, one hand to the next. And then he's stabbing him, and he realized the vegan fork is trained not to penetrate meat, right? It's programmed. So he says, "Throw me some lettuce." You know? I guess the idea is he's about to use the lettuce, like to press through the lettuce into the guy. You know, and that's very silly. It's very throwaway. But you know, it works. When they're buried underground, you know, Crichton has a screwdriver in his finger and then attaches an eye and pokes it through all the sand to the surface. And you sort of hear this kind of Star Wars parody music of, you know, sort of R2, you know, getting up to the surface. But it's fun and funny. And, you know, we've seen some of that stuff with Crichton, but, you know, it works, and the timing is good. None of this stuff is belabored. Yeah, that editing really makes a huge difference.
Yes, I agree. I so agree. I think this is just, it feels like, say, they went and spent time with this in both you know, during pre-production, during production, and then post-production. Like, this has been a labor of love. Now, weirdly, like, this is only, you know, I looked on IMDb and a few others, like, this has been quite divisive between Red Dwarf fans. Some are very much like us, that think it's, you know, it's great fun, and da-da-da. Others are sort of like, oh, it's not as funny, it's not as quick-witted as I think the main complaint is it's not as quick-witted as it is when it's a sitcom, and that, you know, some others is like, oh, it doesn't work on an epic scale, and I'm like, no, I think the complete opposite. So I'm very much like, this does work on an epic scale, you know, to cover this sort of these ideas, and I think this is working almost as a sitcom, just as a longer episode, really.
Yeah, I mean, I have a different thought on that. I mean, I think that, you know, you said, is this the best of Red Dwarf? Well, maybe. I mean, I would say this is the best of Red Dwarf as a big budget, quote unquote, right? It's all, you know, it's all relative, epic, right? I mean, for so many years, there was talk about a Red Dwarf movie. This, you know, shows what that could be like. I mean, I think that the recent Hitchhikers movie is very good. It did not do well at the box office. So I don't know if, you know, The Promised Land had to survive at the box office, if it really would. But I think that as far as it being the best of Red Dwarf, I think it's the best of a different kind of Red Dwarf. I mean, you know, the early episodes that, you know, we like have that kind of sitcom unpolished feel. And,
Yes.
you know, they're self-contained, they're small. I like them. And over the years, as the show has had better special effects and done multi-part episodes and done continuing storylines across the season and whatnot, it's sort of increasingly grown toward something like The Promised Land. I don't think that one, I mean, God, I hate saying this because I think I want there to be more Red Dwarf, but I mean, if you put these as polarities and you have a sort of like sitcom that's a little rough around the edges, but great timing and absolutely charming. And then you have The Promised Land is sort of like the polished, more epic, more continuing storyline, better special effects. I think The Promised Land is sort of like the best version of this version of Red Dwarf.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, I'd agree with that. I would. Yeah, I think, because again, it's sort of, it's interesting where it's come from to where it's it's like you say, it's come from that 1988, that low budget sort of sci-fi comedy that people in the BBC were sort of ignoring and didn't really think was going to do anything. To this, to something that I think we're doing a massive deep dive on, and has produced a feature length episode to quite a lot of success, I think.
Well, before
I think just to see that,
go ahead.
No, just to see that journey, I think it goes to show the success of Red Dwarf, but also sort of why it works is that it can evolve and be seen and works on those different levels.
So, but before, I know we're going to do the sort of best of each season, but maybe this would be a good place to say, at the risk of critics or commentators becoming, creative, what would you do next for Red Dwarf, if anything? Are you content with this being the end, or if is there anything that Red Dwarf needs to do, or what would you like to see?
I think if this was to be the end, I would be satisfied. From a creative standpoint, would I want more? Yeah, I think so. I would happily see another series if they were to do it more in the vein of 11 rather than 12.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not. What else I would do? The one thing I sort of feel that this is missing is we've said about them being a bit more adventurous. This misses, to me, a multimedia element. I think that there would be grounds for. I mean, Titan Books do a whole bunch of stuff, but they do a Doctor Who series.
Yeah,
I would love to see them do. I don't know. I don't care. 6-part, 12-part. Just a. If I could see them do a comic book series for Red Dwarf, and really sort of do whatever they wanted to do, 6 episodes, 6 issues, whatever. I would love to see that, and just see how that would do, because I think they've got the potential there. You've got this, the budget's unrestricted because it's whatever you can draw on the page, but also with those sort of like printing rights, the things I'd love to see. I mean, this is dream. This is me being Dreamcatcher. I think I've said it before in this. Like, why has Red Dwarf never crossed over with Doctor Who?
Right.
It seems like common sense. Something like that would be ace.
And they could do it in the comics, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely. Well, Titan have got the print rights for Titan have got the print rights for Doctor Who. I think Rebellion still hold the print rights for Red Dwarf, but it could easily be resolved. I'm pretty sure if someone wanted to do it, it would happen.
Yeah. Well, in addition to getting this magazine back into print, the comics in there that haven't been seen.
And that's the other thing I would love to get. Like, it's 35 years soon, and I just think to get those, and like you say, I sent you a couple of issues so you can see them. Yeah, I've
been reading them.
I've managed to collect that first volume, the first 14 issues. And I love the comics in them. Like they are. I mean, not just the articles. Those magazines have got some great stuff in, and I think they're just being lost to history. And I think it's a real shame that that's there somewhere. They should be reprinted. I mean, the comic material in itself is good. You get some reprints of the you get some comic versions of the episodes.
Yeah, the first 2 episodes.
But more than that, you get some specific Red Dwarf adventures. You get Mr. Flibble adventures. You get Ace Rimmer Adventures. You get an entire soap opera with androids. It's incredible.
Yeah, and there's a series with the Crichton as what is his name? The
Jake
detective.
Bullitt. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's a detective series with Jake Bullitt, and it's you get Inquisitor. There's a couple of Inquisitor shorts as
Oh,
well.
that's right. Yeah.
It really does cover all bases. To know that it's going, that you can get them on eBay. Just the Smegazine, you can collect them on eBay, but that they will go out as print and they will disappear soon. And it's a real shame that if this is going to be the last episode of whatever, 35 years coming up soon, and I just think it's something they should really, really look at. What about you? What would you do?
Well, I would not be satisfied with this as the end of the show. I mean, I would say it ended on a high note, and that's better than most shows get. But I want them to address more how they're aging. I want them to address more, that they are alone in the universe. That has Earth's sun exploded? I want to see, them kind of take. I mean, I always want to see like the sort of like the last story, right? I want to see the characters die. I want to see things change, and I want to see them break up the formula more. I want to see Kachansky again. I miss that stuff, and I would love for them to go out on a here is our final season. We're going to take our time and really do 6 or 8 episodes that, maybe bring back Ace Rimmer, kind of tie up everything. And then if you do, if you want to do more after that, you can, you just said it before or something. You figure some way around it. The other thing that I cannot, is my fantasy. Okay. This is going to be weird. Okay. My fantasy is a 1 season long animated Red Dwarf. You were talking about wanting to see it in comics. I want to see an animated Red Dwarf. And what I specifically want is I want an animated dwarf that has the first episode is resolves the season 2 finale. And you see a pregnant Dave, and it seems to me the simplest resolution to it is when they go back into a parallel universe, instead of going into the universe with the women and the gender swapped, they go into the universe where Crichton joined the ship after Crichton. And Holly's been replaced with a female computer, and then the episode ends with you following the other characters, and it's like, okay, well, right there we've like screwed the reader, the viewer over of like, guess what, we're replacing our characters. But also,
you thought you were following these other characters for all these years.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be so much fun. And then I would love if the rest of the episodes followed, resolve the season 8 finale. And there are about like 4 episodes that you'd need there where you'd need to like resolve that finale. You need to get Rimmer to die again. I'd love if, Ace Rimmer's there. He could even be the one that solves the finale cliffhanger problem. And presumably somewhere in there, Kachansky agrees to date Lister, maybe because they just had this near-death experience in Only the Good, But and then you need the breakup episode where Kachansky breaks up and apparently dies. And then I'd love, you've got a decade to cover. Lister can mourn for a decade in an episode. You can jump forward for a whole decade and then lead into Back to Earth. And then 1 episode after that follows up on Back to Earth and has, Lister dedicated to finding Kachansky. So basically those animated episodes could sort of turn Back to Earth into a fully fledged season 9 that covers 10 years and resolves that cliffhanger and gets you through to Kachansky's he can find Kachansky, and Crichton could have deleted the memory of having helped Kachansky escape. And I think that would be a great kind of epic storyline that would sort of like resolve the continuing narratives of 6, 7, and 8 in a satisfying way. And we'd get to see an animated dwarf, and you could, go ahead.
You just call you could. I'd love to see it. I can picture in my head the kind of animation I want to see, and you just call it Resolutions, Red Dwarf Resolutions, and it deals with all that. That'd be ace. That'd be brilliant.
I'd love that. I mean, and I know that like part of the charm of Red Dwarf is that it's not a slave to continuity. It's never going to be a slave to continuity, but I think that these episodes, like going forward 10 years, following the alternate universe cast, I mean, these are definitely screwing with the reader things or the viewer things. And, I mean, I'd love if between, some more live action stuff and the animated stuff, if you could get closer to 100 episodes and kind of, I'd love to see this in serialization on Sci-Fi or something. And as, here's this crazy, inconsistent 100 episode epic,
Yeah, there is more story to tell. I do love the idea of the animated series, though. That would be ace.
I would love that, and sort of fill in those gaps in clever ways. It's 3 hours. It'd be 3 hours total of animation. That's achievable.
Yeah, but it wouldn't even have to be expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think 35 years coming up, like they could just do stuff. I don't know if Dave would ever be. The thing is, I realised I did some digging before we get into it. Although Dave, UK TV Play, presents it and produces it and stuff, a lot of the rights actually do still sit with some slightly different companies for different things. But so the old magazine stuff sits with Rebellion, but apparently the future stuff still sits with it's called Grant Naylor Productions.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got the rights to do it. I just
Yeah,
wish they would.
I do too. I mean, I think there's a great opportunity there, and obviously we would eat it up,
Oh yeah, I mean, I honestly think, these companies that do. I think I mentioned it. These companies that do like they bind a book for you and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm definitely really sort of like seriously considering like saving up some money and doing getting those issues, that first volume
of magazine
bound as a hardback book. I think it'd be amazing.
Well, and I love the idea of the comics. I mean, it'd be great to see. I mean, I have enjoyed the comics in this magazine, and I'm going to get more of them. But it'd be great to see, a modern comics interpretation.
I agree. I would love to see it. It'd be so cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See, this is it. This is what I shouldn't be a bloody project manager for a housing company. I should be working on these, giving people ideas.
Amen. Absolutely. No, and you've had so many. I mean, I make comics, and you've had so many great, great takes on ways to improve these episodes. In minimal changes. I've been really impressed with some of your solutions and the sort of continuity errors that you've spotted, and also the elegant solutions you've come up with. So obviously we need to, be in charge of like the Red Dwarf expanded universe that should exist.
That's what I want. If they would pay me to do that kind of stuff, that's what I want. If I could be an editor on that sort of thing, or produce, that'd be fantastic. Maybe, maybe in an alternative reality, that's what's happened.
Yeah, that's our parallel universe, in which the politics are a bit different.
Yeah, right. I mean, we'll just jump into it. We'll do the next bit.
Mm-hmm.
3, 2, 1. Okay, so that's our ideas. That's what we've sort of covered for the possible future, alternative futures, if you will. But let's look back to the past. One of the final things we want to do in rounding out this epic review of this. I mean, God knows what we're going to do for our bonus episodes at the end of season 2. we're going to go back and we want to give our favourite episodes from each of the series, 1 through 12. And so I don't know if we want to sort of just go season by season. We'll just give our each give our thoughts on our favourite episodes as we work our way through.
Sure. Sounds good.
Cool. So go on then. I think we're going to have a couple of similarities, but series 1.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable how similar our views are. Yeah, for me, series 1 comes down to the end, waiting for God and Future Echoes, and for me, Future Echoes wins. And it wins for me because, like, the end, especially in rewatching it, it's really the last 10 minutes of the end that blow my mind. But it's Future Echoes that cements this as a series. And if I were just watching this straight through for the first time, when I went back and actually did that, having seen odd episodes on PBS here in the States, Future Echoes just blew my mind and made me, I mean, at that point I was like, I will watch everything this series ever does just because I love this so much. This is so crazy. So that's my call. What's yours?
No, I 100% agree. For series 1, it's definitely Future Echoes. As you say, sort of the end is good. It's a good solid start, but you can tell it's almost like a testing of the waters. It's a pilot, and there's a couple of ideas in it. But to go straight to a concept like Future Echoes, and to have it, I mean, some of the complaints we've had about some of these later seasons is, it's not very tight. It's got, it's sort of the resolution's a bit naff. Future Echoes doesn't have any of that. Like it's right. We've got this idea, we've got these concepts, and we're gonna lay it out over 23 minutes of TV show, and it's tight, it's concise, it's satisfying, and like I say, it's just really mind blowing that this is the second episode. I mean, it comes across as confident and ballsy. It's a second episode because this could have put people off. I mean, it may have done. People come in at the first one and go, "Oh, okay, I know what this is going to be." This is sort of the Odd Couple in space. And then all of a sudden you get Future Echoes and you've got you've got people talking to blank space. You get predictions of the future. You've got an old Dave Lister in bed. You've got all this other stuff. Like it's an excellent episode. Yeah. So Future Echoes is a great start, not just to the series, but to the whole show.
And I think what you're underlining is how much it sort of telegraphs we are going to screw with the viewer. So much of what we like is the sheer perversity of the show. It's sheer willingness to do things that, a continuing show should not do, and embracing them. And Future Echoes just does that and blows my mind. So what's your pick for season 2?
So season 2, I went back really between Parallel Universe and, for me at least, Parallel Universe and Better Than Life. But I landed on Better Than Life. Again, just because I kind of like the concepts in it. I like the character moments in it. I like the fact that really it's one of the first sort of episodes where it's sort of, it's early on, it's cementing Rimmer as a bit of as a real git, but the fact he's sort of, his self-loathing is sort of like, it breaks everything. And, to me, I think it's just one of those episodes that sort of, it's the first episode. It's almost like that Star Trek thing of like being able to take them to Earth without really taking them to Earth. And so they sort of, you have that fun moment of interacting with people. They do silly, they're playing golf. It's got some daft moments, but to me, it's one of the first ones I remember like really enjoying. So to me, Better Than Life for series 2. What about you?
Yeah, for me, Better Than Life was not even on my short list, interestingly. So for me, it kind of comes down to Thanks for the Memories, Parallel Universe, and Kryten. So Parallel Universe is the one that's on both of ours. But interestingly, I chose Kryten. And I kept track as I was going. I sort of rated these, as I was going. So, they're consistent with what I felt watching them, right? As opposed to like looking back. And for me, Crichton just works, and I know it's a different actor, but the perversity of finally finding an android and he's utterly insane. It's just so good. And I know they resisted involving an android, but it seems to me that while Crichton is different in this episode, a little different than the Crichton we know and love, it's still just such a mind fuck, so to speak, to see him. So that's it for me.
Cool. Yeah, no, I can see what. I mean, Crichton is a great episode. I think it's sort of, in many ways, I think Crichton sort of starts to solidify many of the aspects of the show of being that sort of the rebel. I mean, the whole point of that episode is about being the rebel, and the show really is a rebel, isn't it? Really. So, that's a good choice. I do like that episode. What about series 3?
Yeah, so for me, series 3 came down to Backwards in the Last Day, the first and last episodes, and for me, Backwards won out. Not by a lot, but it did won out, and so this is like the first time that we see Earth, and it's clever. I mean, looking back on it, I think I don't necessarily remember it as well as I remember some other ones, but it has that sort of weird Red Dwarf take on a sci-fi concept, Star Trek, sort of going back to Earth, but things are weird and things are different. And so for me, it's enjoyable. It plays well, and that's what I chose. So what about you?
Yes. Series 3 was an interesting one because this is sort of 3. As I said before, 3 and 4 is the Red Dwarf I remember from being a kid. Like, it's the one I really sort of associate with for my nostalgia, because it's when I sort of got into it. And so there's a couple in here. Like, I'm not hugely keen on Body Swap. But the other 5, I was really sort of looking at them and going up and down, and I was sort of giving them some scores. And I really like Marooned for again, because I sort of like the build of the relationship between Lister and Rimmer. I love Polymorph, even though I know it's a bit junk, just because of some of the bits and pieces in it. Time, but again, like yourself, I ended up coming down to Backwards.
Wow.
Because, and the reason so is because I do like the concept. It's the first time we sort of introduced to Crichton, the Robert Llewellyn Crichton, and this is the rejigging of the show. And again, it comes down to this thing I said about confidence and the sort of like how ballsy these things are. That there's something about this episode that's just sort of like, it's the first episode of the series. It's like, right, we've completely changed gear. Rimmer's now got himself a sort of a Captain Scarlet looking outfit. He's doing all this other stuff. We've got a new Crichton. We've got this other stuff, and we're going to separate the crew out, and we're going to go back to Earth. And it's just, whenever I go back to this series, although I like the other ones, I think Backwards does stand out as the episode to me that probably sort of be the first episode I saw, one of the first episodes I probably saw that probably did just draw me in straight away. So yeah, no, Backwards I think has got a lot to answer for my love for Red Dwarf. So that's probably one of the reasons. I'm not, there are moments I know aren't great, but there's even stuff we've referred to consistently, like Kat's exit from the episode is brilliant.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, Backwards for series 3.
Well, and I think you're right that it is the sort of confidence of establishing that new formula, which is, I mean, certainly the most radical departure the show's taken. But it's amazing, looking back, it's amazing how everything's firing on all cylinders right away. Like, as soon as they introduce Crichton, they've made some changes. Everything is just hitting on all cylinders right from the start.
Yeah, agreed. It's so good because of it. So what about series 4 for you then?
Well, I think it's your turn to go first, but I'm glad to do it.
Okay. No, yeah, go on, go first. We'll take it.
It's up to you.
No, go on,
Okay.
Go.
Well, for me, it comes down to Camille, Justice, and Dimension Jump. And not scared to say, for me, it's Dimension Jump. Nothing beats Ace Rimmer. Do I have to say more?
No. It's you know, this is again this is sort of like the heart of Red Dwarf for me. I think series 4 is probably the over time I have revisited the most. I love every episode in this for different reasons. I mean, I criticize them all, but I almost do it with love. You know, when we talked about them. But for me, it was if I was to narrow it down to the three, to me it was Justice, Dimension Jump, and Meltdown. I think Meltdown is incredible and gets dark and really has some sort of like, you know, interesting moments. But as you said, nothing beats Ace Rimmer. Dimension Jump. It's, you know, we're going to obviously sit series by series, but if I was to do a top 5. If I was to do a top 5 of the entire series, like Dimension Jump would no doubt be in that top 5. You know, maybe even a top 3. So, yeah, I love Dimension Jump. Excellent episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Justice obviously is a kind of, you know, staple. And Meltdown we've come back to so many times in talking about Rimmer's, you know, personality that it kind of represents. I think I like the episode less than you do, but it kind of represents a polarity of Rimmer as sociopath, you know, you know, in the series. So it is a kind of touchstone for that reason. So what about series 5? Oh, I know what you're going to choose, right? I mean, there's no doubt.
Yes, yeah. There's a couple in here though, and it was weird because when we went back and when we discussed this, like, you know, there's a few that I like, but we sort of picked fault with it. You know, we had some issues with the Inquisitor, more so because of sort of the way it works, and some of the sort of the bits of quarantine that sort of like, you know, are fine, but you know, the end, it all comes down to this, you know, with the luck virus, the end bit really with Crazy Rimmer is the reason that one works. And I really enjoy Terraform. I think Terraform is another great exploration of Rimmer. And has some fantastic moments, like, you know, the fact that the frogs all ribbit, you know, useless
yeah,
is so good. And something I'll, you know, even I sort of I will in my head I will harken back to, and the fact that, like you say, it has these great moments. Like they talk about the Three Musketeers, you know, they talk about them being the Musketeers, you know, when they talk about them being the crew from the Dwarf, and then it's the Musketeers that appear from the graves of his past. Charm and self-worth and all this other stuff. And I think that some of that's really well thought out. But yeah, it can't beat Back to Reality. Back to Reality is without a doubt the best episode of this series. It's got, you know, the comedy's great. You know, just the idea that they've been playing, if it's a game, they've been playing it wrong for 4 years. You know, all the stuff about sort of, you know, when you get you know, the guy keeps calling him a twonk, revealing that Rimmer was actually a plant, and he's sort of it's all in the micro dot. It's many good stuff. Jake Bullitt, Dwayne Dibley. You know, the fact it picks away at the characters more and more. It's brilliant, and the fact it's got the acting as well of them. You know, when they're in the car, we said it on the show. Well, I said it on the show. They do an entire car chase in this episode.
Yes,
without leaving Starbug, and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So Back to Reality is most definitely the best episode of series 5 for me, at least. What about you?
Oh, agreed. I mean, I don't think there's the serious contest. I mean, for me, what's interesting for me, and I love Back to Reality. It also represents a sort of that same kind of screwing with the audience that I just really love, you know, that it's convincing that this could be the case, right? And if any show's going to do it, it's going to be Red Dwarf. So, I mean, Back to Reality is a classic. What's interesting for me is that my runners-up are totally different than yours. I mean, I do think there's a big gap between Back to the Reality and the others. But for me, Holoship makes a list, and a Holoship is sort of the Rimmer version of Camille, and both of those made my list, and as runners up, and didn't make yours. And then Demons and Angels, despite its flaws, I like quite a bit. But yeah, nothing's going to beat Back to Reality. Okay, so I think I know what yours will be for 6, but I did 2 in a row. So I think I know your 6 and 7 and 8.
Yeah, probably. Well, go on. What's your 6?
Well, 6, the clear standout, no competition, no runners up, is Rimmerworld. Which to me is just such a clear standout. I mean, Out of Time is for me clearly the second best, but Rimmerworld is so much fun, and you had I like it a lot better than the Waxworld one, Meltdown. So for me, Rimmerworld with the Roman Rimmers, he's stranded, and there's the female Rimmer, and all of this stuff. How quickly the world has gone to hell once Rimmer is in charge is my clear choice. What about you?
Yeah, you're spot on. Rimmerworld is ace. It's fantastic. It's got everything. It's so well done. And it also opens up these ideas, like you say, the whole sort of like the fact that the H and Rimmer become sort of almost godlike. So when they question the guy on the throne, like, I am here, and all that, it's really good. Looking back though, and when we went back and when we reviewed this series, it was a bit, I'm not saying heartbreaking, so that's a bit much, but it was disappointing for me to go back to Series 6 and actually sort of to look at it and go, yeah, do you know what? This is actually a pretty weak series.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sirens, I think is not good. I think Legion's pretty good. In that sort of sense, I kind of like Legion. Gunman of the Apocalypse is naff. Emo Hawk is dreadful. Going back to, I was like, wow, that's really bad. But like I say, so really, Rimmerworld and Out of Time are the best two. And again, like that thing of we've said about the desire to basically just fuck with the crowd and the audience, of having a cliffhanger like that and then just disappear for 4 years. was I remember as a kid just being like, no, what's happening? Come on. Was great, but to see the end of Out of Time, to see Starbug destroyed, was, I remember just seeing sat there and gobsmacked. So, but Rimmerworld's definitely the best. It's a fantastic episode.
Yeah, and I agree with you that 6 is, when we reviewed it, it was surprising how, I mean, even going back and doing this list, seasons 1 through 5, I all have, in some cases a clear favorite, but I mean, we've only disagreed on one, but I had, 2 others that were relatively close that I thought, boy, anyone watching the show should probably see those episodes. Once you get to season 6, it's like, yeah, just watch Rimworld, maybe Out of Time, you're fine.
Yeah.
So you want to do series 7? I know what there's no doubt we're both going to be,
I'll call it then. To me, it stoked me a clipper.
Yes.
I was almost going to say a robberus then, just to wind you up. Stoke Me a Clipper is it's the pinnacle of this series. I mean, it's also, like I say, it's the first closing of the arc for Rimmer, and it's in a series of missteps and bad choices in many cases. This stands out as an episode that's got heart. It's got some great acting again from Chris Barry. It's well thought out. It's really good. It's a great episode to me. I really enjoyed this episode, even outside of Series 7. But the rest of Series 7, as we
Yeah.
pointed out, it's got some good moments. Like you said, the little dancing rimmers in blue.
Mm-hmm.
There's some moments in sort of like when they're talking to the virus with Epideme, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But in Ticket to Ride, I know you sort of, I think you like that more than I do, but
Right.
it comes down to what this what this series comes down to me is that moment in Ouroboros. And it's what we've echoed in later series of this is quick resolution of that is just dreadful. And it hangs over the rest of the series in a really bad way. So yeah, stoke me a clipper. What were your thoughts on 7 then?
Yeah, very similar to yours. I mean, I do like the JFK stuff. I do like, I get what Duck Soup is doing in the show. I mean, I love the dancing rimmers in blue. I think Beyond a Joke is okay. I think Epideme and Nanarchy are probably, second and third if I had to choose them. But yeah, Stoke Me Clipper right from the start, that ridiculous teaser, that ridiculous just, air gliding on an alligator and, shooting Nazis and, all of that is just wonderful. And you're quite right. I mean, bringing the Rimmer arc to a successful conclusion, seeing Dave and Lister's relationship, and that Dave not only helps Rimmer, but then hides it from the rest of the crew, so, and I mean, yeah, we criticized, you made a great point about there shouldn't be all those, graves in the conclusion, but it's still a clever idea. And yeah, I mean, it's a classic episode. But I agree. I have a lot of admiration for what 7 is doing. I don't really admire 6 for ditching Red Dwarf and being focused on Starbug, but I really do admire, I know it's because, Barry was only available for 4 episodes, but I do love adding Kachansky. I do love screwing with the basic premise of the show. It just doesn't work, at least in 7. So Stoke Me a Clipper is by far the best.
Yeah.
And I'll just go for 8 because it's a hard one. Back in the Red one. The first one for me is just the clear standout. If I love what they're doing in 7 with Kachansky and screwing with things, but it just doesn't work. All of that stuff works in 8. And right from the beginning, it's so much fun seeing the captain back. It's so much fun seeing a Red Dwarf that's populated. Your mind is like reeling at how are they going to continue this? And they continue it for the whole season. And this is a great season. I mean, this is a fun season. It is by far the best season that is offbeat and really screws with, the formula of these 3 seasons that do so. So for me, nothing beats that first episode as you see Crichton thought insane, he's like, oh no, you're all dead and you reconstructed it. And they're like, he needs to be reformatted. It's just firing on all cylinders. And it's the pinnacle of what Red Dwarf can be when it works, screwing with the essential formula. What about you?
No, I'm exactly, that was my conclusion. I could come down to Back in the Red Part 1. But I struggled with it a little bit because, again, it's that Part 1. It's not a complete episode.
Mm-hmm.
But then I look at the wider series and I look at the standalone episodes. You've got Cassandra and Crikey TV, and then Only the Good, really, the sort of standalone episodes. And Only the Good ends on a flaming cliffhanger. And whilst Crikey TV has got some real issues, I think if you were to air it today, Cassandra's good, but like you say, Back in the Red Part 1, and to be fair, Back in the Red as all 3 episodes, I think it worked. I think there's some slightly diminishing returns. I think they end up padding bits out, but Back in the Red Part 1 is so good. From the moment that it sort of throws you back into what was the original series, but in a different format. The fact, like I say, the show starts with them in a bunk, and Lister winding up Rimmer.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? How does this work? And then you get the sort of like the flashback of how it all came about. is brilliant. It's so good. Like I say, it's firing on all cylinders. They're all working well. But what I would say is, having seen this, is going back and watching this, I always weirdly sort of not resented Chloe Annette, but you sort of think, oh yeah, you were fine as Kachansky, but you never quite fit in. It was never done properly. But watching 8, I'm actually like, no, she was in a lot better in 8 than she was in 7, or used. I should say she's used better in 8 than she was in 7. And I do think I'm like, oh yeah, it's just such a shame she never comes back in any real way to be utilised. But yeah, I really enjoy Series 8, and I think it gets a lot of flack, unrightfully, really, and should be revisited by people.
Agreed 100%. I mean, and I can't say, as much as we love Red Dwarf and we love the formula, dissing Kachansky and imagining that really, 7 and 8 just go off and aren't Red Dwarf in some way is ludicrous. That's just not accurate. So,
now we get back to Earth. So you get three episodes to choose from. And this is quite obvious. I think this is quite simple. I think we've made it quite clear that, from my point of view, this is episode 1.
For sure.
Episode 1 is good. It's got some really good stuff in it. It's solid. It's got some. It's sort of like, it's trying to pick up the pieces of the gap between 8 and 9 and give you some indication of what's gone on. It's the humour's good. It's all pretty good. I mean, to be fair, there's moments in 2, as we sort of said, that I like. The episode 2's got some really good moments, some human moments of, like, Dave interacting with the 2 kids on the bus. Actually, even when they appear in the shop, the fact that, like, the cat, they all get thrown out and the cat just sort of lands on his feet, and then it goes to pot a little bit in episode 3. But yeah, episode 1 in this is quite strong and was a promising start to something that's a bit of a letdown overall. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said. I mean, episode 1 is the winner. Episode 2 is not that far off. I mean, episode 1 ends with the appearance of that woman who supposedly, works for the Jupiter Mining Corps. So really all of Back to Earth 1 takes place on Red Dwarf. And it's got stuff that doesn't quite work, like, Rimmer, sticking his fingers up as he's listening to music as they're being attacked. But it's still clever. And I think that, it feels like, I mean, I remember watching this when it aired, and it felt like, okay, I mean, Red Dwarf was never perfect, but this is Red Dwarf is back. It's working. And, it's got a higher budget. It looks better, but this is the Red Dwarf that I know and love. And then 2 is all the parallel, in our universe stuff, some of which is great, but some of which doesn't quite make sense, And then the third part is just the Blade Runner pastiche that, we don't like. So 10. Yeah, do you want me to go? My guess is we'll agree on this. Is Fathers and Sons. This is the Lister as his own dad giving himself the advice and the tapes that he's made, and Lister, the supposed son, the one who he's not drunk and he's sobered up and he's watching these tapes, saying, "Oh, I'll just skip to the next tape," and you skipped to the next tape, didn't you, Dave? And, the fact that it makes, I know if there's one problem with this, it's that it relies on Ouroboros, which we both have huge problems with. But I think it is the best episode. I think it's a strong episode. What about you?
No, I agree. I mean, I think, 10 is overall is relatively weak, but I think Father and Son stands out. And if anything, I think one of the things about it is, whilst it relies on Ouroboros, it makes good on a really crappy setup. What basically it ignores all the sort of the daft stuff from Ouroboros, and I hate all of that to do with that episode of his, how he comes to that conclusion and the sort of the logistics of it. But Father and Son sort of just takes it as a simple concept and just runs with it in a really sort of funny way. And again, this is, Craig Charles actually, This again is him. He gets a chance to stand out in this episode and do some really good stuff. And him interacting with his drunken self and everything across his videos is really good. So yeah, no, Fathers and Sons is definitely a highlight in this episode, and it's what this series does well, or this show does well, is how you say, like we said, its continuity is a bit hit and miss. It doesn't really care, but every now and then it'll pull something out of the bag, and you'll go, we know this is fixed continuity, and we're going to reference it, and now we're going to do something with it, and this is a successful doing of something with that sort of fixed continuity, even if I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the other thing I would say is that this is the first episode in all of our best of, right? All of our choices that is a real Lister episode. We've had multiple Rimmer episodes, obviously, Crichton, I'm sure that we'll have more. We both love Crichton episodes, but there aren't a lot of just really great Lister episodes. And this might be the best Lister episode.
Yeah, I would probably say so. I mean, I think, Lister episodes, if I look back, there's in the first couple of series, I suppose the end is very much a Lister episode. Confidence and Paranoia, maybe. But yeah, they don't really come often. They sort of, it's a very, and I think we sort of said this. I mean, looking back at series 3 and 4, you get episodes of Lister interacting with people, but if you look at it like DNA in series 3, we said this, series 4, sorry, Camille and DNA, they're two Crichton episodes, pretty much back to back.
Yeah,
and then you end it with two like Rimmer episodes. Considering Dave's meant to be the last human, like he doesn't get a great deal of time.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, obviously. I mean, I was reading these interviews in this magazine that you sent me. And, those interviews make it, pretty clear. Like the show just started with Lister. Everyone else was just, who can we add to the cast, right? And one of the reasons Crichton was added was none of the people they added could touch anything, because Rimmer is a hologram and Holly's a computer and Kat is uninterested in doing anything. So considering Lister is clearly, the main character, the heart of the show, he's kind of just, I guess the best way to look at it is he's kind of taken for granted. But I think that the most interesting way of looking at it is how much Crichton and Rimmer in particular have developed and just become fascinating, wonderful characters when, by all rights, you would not expect them to be. No.
Yeah, the side characters that have really sort of grown and come into their own. And in that respect, I mean, we said that for Series 11 then, there was a couple really. I mean, I actually really enjoyed Series 11. I think it's a really solid series. To me, it starts well. Twentica's pretty good. Samsara's, I actually really enjoy Samsara because you get to see the other ship, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But Give and Take, has got some really good moments in, trying to get sort of the organs out of Cat, but also just the whole bit of, was it Snacky?
Yes.
What's the drop?
Asclepius and Snacky.
Yeah. That's fantastic. But the one for me, the episode that sort of weirdly, I can't believe didn't get more attention is Crisis.
Amen, brother.
Because it addresses sort of Crichton as having midlife crisis and this idea, and some of the ideas are fantastically silly, like say him getting the Ferrari red body armor and zipping around making the noise is so good. But the fact that the episode ends with them conversing with the sentient universe,
yes,
like that's a big idea. Like I can't believe they went there. And they do, and it works. It works well. The fact that this, I can't get over the fact this should have been the last episode in this series, as in, like, it should have topped Series 11. Like, if you ended this series with the notion that the Red Dwarf crew gave the universe a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Like that's a way to end a show. That's how you end a series. So yeah, crisis. What about you?
Oh, I agree 100%. Give and Take is my runner-up. I love Snacky. I mean, this whole business with, Snacky saying, I need your advice. What do you do when other people believe you're a sophisticated medical droid and you actually dispense snacks? I mean, there's so much. Those droids are just wonderful, and also Cat in that episode trying not to give up the kidney and then instantly pivoting when he thinks his kidney is in jeopardy. There's a lot, and then they take the kidney from the future. I mean, there's some time travel, stuff that works or doesn't for you. But yeah, I mean, Crisis, nothing beats it. And you know what I think is most amazing about Crisis? I mean, obviously there's Butler. I mean, if you described Crisis to me, if you said that like in series 11, you were going to have yet another Crichton episode, and there's going to be a better version of, the Ace Rimmer. We're going to do an Ace Rimmer for Crichton. I'd say like, okay, we'll see how that works. Like that could easily misfire. Not to mention we're going to have them converse with the universe, and Butler's going to be like, yeah, I did that all the time. None of this sounds like it should work. And damned if it doesn't just work minute by minute. And again, by the end, it has that sort of like, my head is reeling. It's wonderful. I mean, the best Red Dwarf episodes feel like this, where you feel so delighted, so charmed, so entertained. And at the same time, your head is reeling at like the sci-fi concepts, there's so many episodes that do that, where it's like, we're missing time. What happened? And we slowly find out. And I think Red Dwarf can delight and at the same time send your mind reeling in this way that is so unique to Dwarf and just so wonderful. And Crisis is a amazing example of exactly this.
Yeah. So 12.
12, Skipper, I think I was clear about that in going through them. I think obviously Siliconia is okay. Mechocracy has its moments. I love the robot vote. But Mechocracy is definitely the runner-up for me. But Skipper, it has its problems, but for me, it's fun. And, seeing the Red Dwarf as the leak occurs, and, seeing the happy ending that that Rimmer cannot accept. It probably would be a runner-up in another season, but for series 12, to me, it's the best episode. What about you?
I really sort of struggled with this one because, as you say, they're not all great. To me, to give three, it's Siliconia, Mechocracy, and probably Skipper. But I went with Siliconia.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because, again, it's one of those ones that like it made me chuckle. I like seeing the guys in the Crichton makeup. I think that's kind of cool. I like the fact that like Rimmer's willing to give into it.
Yeah.
Just the idea of doing that. And you get that exploration of Crichton a little bit, but also sort of like the hypocrisy. It explores the hypocrisy of it a little bit, which I find quite interesting. So, Siliconia is again, but again, it's not. It's that sort of thing of the best of a bad bunch, maybe. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We have done it. Whoopee to us. There was a couple of technical issues, so it does sort of just cut out a little bit there. So we lost the last minute or so. But that's it. You've still got everything. We've got all of our thoughts covering 12, 13, actually, epic series of the great series that is Red Dwarf. One of, if not the best sci-fi comedy of the 20th and into the 21st century. I hope you've enjoyed this journey that we went on. It's been incredible. It's been a real deep dive. I don't think I've ever taken the time to analyse and review and discuss Red Dwarf in this depths. And what Julian and I have done has been fantastic, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So I hope you have too. If you want to talk about Red Dwarf, please get in contact with us at PodTimespace on Twitter. But that's it for the bonus shows. No more bonus shows. This was our big bonus epic thing we wanted to do. This was our big sort of like bonus project, as it were. But we're back into the movies now. So starting from the next episode will be Season 2, Episode 1. The first episode of our new series. And we're starting off with a kicker. We're going to be going out and we're going to be doing all the way back to 1954, and we're going to be talking about the original Godzilla, or Gojira, if you will. So, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back on track with sci-fi movies, and I'll be putting out what the rest of them are as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this bonus series, and I hope you are looking forward to Series 2, Season 2, just as much as we are. I hope to talk to you soon.